U.S. is facing a surge of illegal immigrants at the border, and a large number of Chinese nationals are among them. Has China weaponized the border crisis? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. There is a border crisis in America, and China could be behind it. There's a huge number of Chinese people illegally crossing the border. Now, there's always been Chinese people illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, but this year there's been a huge spike. Now, I get it. If I were living in China, I'd want to get out of Dodge too. China's economy isn't so hot. Plus, you can disappear for comparing Xi Jinping to Winnie the Pooh or other cartoon villains. Oh my gosh, he really does look like that. But what's happening at the U.S.-Mexico border now might be a bit more sinister than just people fleeing a repressive regime.
Packs of Chinese males of military age, unattached to family groups, pretending not to speak English. These are probably saboteurs who are coming in on the first day of war with Asia. In Asia, I think that we're going to see acts of sabotage, assassinations, detonation of bombs, starting wildfires. And the Biden administration is paying no attention to this at all.
Now that may sound pretty alarmist, and Gordon Chang has been known to make some predictions about China that weren't the most accurate. But there is actually evidence to back that up. We know that Chinese nationals are engaged in espionage in the U.S. U.S. officials told the Wall Street Journal recently that Chinese nationals, sometimes posing as tourists, have accessed military bases and other sensitive sites in the U.S. as many as 100 times in recent years. This includes things like scuba diving near a U.S. government rocket launch site in Florida, or using a tour of the White House to illegally take pictures of the White House grounds. The FBI says it's been overwhelmed by the amount of espionage cases coming from China. FBI Director Christopher Wray said back in 2021 that the FBI is opening a new case on Chinese activity every 10 hours. He said half of all FBI counterintelligence cases are now related to China. And you can't say what China is doing is just what every country does. Chinese espionage is unique. The intelligence chiefs of all the big English-speaking countries, nicknamed the Five Eyes, came together last month to raise awareness about the threat of Chinese espionage.
I recognise up front that all nations spy. All nations seek secrets and all nations seek strategic advantage. But the behaviour we're talking about here goes well beyond traditional espionage.
Unlike the US, where there's a clear distinction between spies and civilians, China uses what's called civil-military fusion, which just means it uses anyone and everyone to carry out its dirty work. So should we be worried about this huge influx of illegal Chinese immigrants crossing the border? Yeah, but there's an even bigger reason to be concerned about illegal Chinese immigration. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. There's been a wave of illegal Chinese immigration to the US, and some are concerned this isn't just people fleeing the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP is actually weaponizing the border crisis. This is China's former defense minister, Chi Haotian. We have a copy of a secret speech he gave to high-level Communist Party officials sometime before he retired in 2003. One of the things he said was, "It is indeed brutal to kill 100 or 200 million Americans, but that is the only path that will secure a Chinese century in which the CCP leads the world." Seems like a nice guy. But he also goes on to talk about how there are too few resources in China and that pollution has made China almost unlivable. So, China must colonize other countries. He says, and I quote, "The great revitalization of the Chinese nation, which of course is not limited to the land we have now, but also includes the whole world." And he specifically says, only countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia have the vast land to serve our needs for mass colonization. And he says the government must lead the Chinese people outside of China. The way he saw it, Chinese nationals moving abroad solved two problems. The first was China's limited capital and expertise. He believed overseas Chinese could help bring both back to China from more advanced, wealthy nations, which would help China develop both its economy and military. The second was resource scarcity in China. Yes, as far as he's concerned, your local Chinatown is really just a way to expand the Chinese race. And no, I'm not kidding, he actually said that. The only thing standing in the CCP's way is the US. He argues that if China can take down the US, all other world powers would bow down before China, which is why solving the issue of America is the mission assigned to the CCP members by history. To him, the issue of taking over Taiwan is really just a red herring. War over Taiwan is really about going to war over the US. So how does China plan to take over the US? Well, really, from his perspective, there are limited options. He says China could just nuke the US, but he didn't like that idea. Not because it would kill millions of people, he liked it for that. The problem is that it would contaminate US resources that China wants. So he says only by using non-destructive weapons that can kill many people will we be able to reserve America for ourselves. So what are those non-destructive weapons? Why, biological weapons, of course. Chur talked about Chinese progress in this area, saying we are capable of achieving our purpose of cleaning up America all of a sudden. And I'm not going to connect any dots because YouTube might take down this channel. Please support us on patreon.com/China Uncensored. But here's where illegal immigration comes in. A few weeks ago, we spoke with Joseph Humeyer, the executive director of the Center for a Secure Free Society, on our podcast, China Unscripted. He's an expert on Latin America and issues around the U.S. southern border. And he told us that China is coordinating its actions in the region with Venezuela, Russia, and Iran. One of their goals is clearly to destabilize the U.S., and one of the ways they're doing that is through illegal immigration.
Certain regimes in the region, specifically going back to Venezuela, have weaponized migration. When Venezuela is the largest mass migration in the history of the Western Hemisphere, it's the largest currently in the world. 7.7 million Venezuelans have fled that country since 2014. And so to be able to the weaponized migration, they had to direct that migration north.
And China is directly benefiting from this.
So China capitalizes on that weaponized migration strategy to be able to insert its own operatives. And I don't have, I can't share certain specific details, but I've traveled to Panama, Colombia. I've traveled to a lot of these borders over the years, and more recently was told specifically by specific authorities in some of these countries about individuals that they have high suspicion belong to not the PLA per se, but Chinese intelligence services.
He's not the only one hearing this either. Congressman Mark Green, who chairs the House Homeland Security Committee, said he was told by a Border Patrol chief that people connected to China's military are being let into the country with other illegal immigrants. This is a life or death struggle the U.S. is engaged in. And these kind of conflicts have happened all throughout history. Now there's a video I want to show you about that. But first, China Uncensored would not exist without support from viewers like you. Join the fans I call the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army by contributing on patreon.com/China Uncensored. All it takes is $1 an episode, and you can set a monthly limit. Today's question comes from Stated Chimp. If the CCP wants to remain in power and be relevant, do you think it's willing to modify its existing ideology and allow some degree of democracy into China, or have it stay the way it is and let it destroy itself from within? I know many foreign and even domestic companies are leaving China, so with the current circumstances as it is now, do you think it has finally seen the writing on the wall, or is it too blind for good? Fantastic question. I don't think the CCP will be able to make that kind of reform. Fundamentally, it's a Marxist-Leninist regime. It's illiberal. That's just inherent in its ideology. If that were to change, it wouldn't be the CCP. On top of that, the lesson the CCP took from the Soviet Union and its collapse was that the reforms Gorbachev attempted is what caused their Communist Party to collapse. So very specifically, the CCP is against those kinds of reforms. And anyone who would try to make reforms like that would be purged by the rest of the party. So thank you for your question and your support, Stated Chimp. And why do people keep engaging in these kinds of life or death power struggles like the one the US and China are engaged in? That's the topic of the latest episode from my new segment, Deep Thoughts While Gaming. Click on the video to check it out. And click on the orange button to support us on Patreon. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.